Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our STEM Campfire. My name is Liz Boyce. I'm a corporate partner at the law firm Piper Alderman. So my day job includes working with companies that are growing and raising capital and with investors, and I co-lead our life sciences group. So I've got particular knowledge of the life sciences part of the STEM universe. As we meet together today, we're gathering from a variety of places. I'm joining you from the traditional lands of the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and so I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any elders in our audience today. In a moment, I'm going to get our team to introduce themselves. Let me just at least introduce them by name and then give you some opening remarks. So we're very happy to be joined today by Mike Nicholls, partner at Main Sequence Ventures, by Natalie Chapman, commercialisation and MD at Gemaker, and Scott Graham, the CEO of Rex Energy. So we're gathering around a STEM campfire today. So by STEM, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, maths. In a business context, we might use the label deep tech. So a business that's founded on scientific, technological or engineering innovation, solving big problems. It's often got a very long research and development pathway and needs quite extensive investment to get to the point of bringing a product successfully to market. And in our audience today, we understand that we have a mix of founders and people working within early stage companies. And so our hope for you today is that we're going to help you to optimise your plans for commercialisation and to communicate more effectively with investors when you're seeking that all-important capital. We're also joined by a number of investors, and some of you may be very well experienced and already investing in the deep tech sector. Others of you might be considering it and perhaps it looks a bit too complicated or too slow to bring a successful result. And so our aim for you is to help you understand some of the dynamics of that sector so you know what to expect as you make those investment decisions. So let me turn to each of our panel just to give us a few opening remarks about what they do and how that speaks to those themes for founders, investors. So can I start with you, Mike?
Thank you very much, Liz. Good to see you. And I also pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm Mike Nicholls. I'm one of the partners at Main Sequence Ventures. Main Sequence Ventures was originally formed out of the federal government's National Innovation and Science Agenda in 2015, officially launched in 2017. We're basically Australia's deep tech venture capital firm. So we invest in research that's coming out of universities or publicly funded research groups or startups that have relationships with those groups. We started with a $250 million fund, of which was seeded by CSIRO and government. We went and raised a bunch of public money in that. We're on to our second fund now. I think we've got roughly 500 million under management and invested in something like 35 companies. My areas of sort of expertise are around the health space, semiconductors, energy and renewable energy and decarbonisation scenarios, with a bit of interest in AI and robotics as well. Does that sort of give you what you need to know?
That's very helpful. Thanks, Mike. So obviously a lot of experience working with quite a broad spread of companies across that deep tech sector.
A lot of different themes, but primarily all scientific and engineering.
Yeah, lovely. And Natalie, may I turn to you? Please tell us a little bit about yourself and some facts of interest for our audience.
Sure. So I'm Natalie Chapman. I'm the Managing Director of Gemaker, which is a national commercialisation agency that specialises in deep tech. And we've been building companies out of research organisations for more than 20 years. In terms of the deep tech, it's very much a slow burn. And so I guess it takes many, many years to happen, but we're really excited about trying to accelerate the growth of these new industries in Australia. So we have companies such as CSL, Cochlear, ResMed, etc. We want the next generation of those sort of organisations in Australia.
Absolutely. They all started small and from little things, big things grow, but it's a long journey, as you say. And finally, Scott, can I turn to you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. My name is Scott Graham, founder and chief executive of Rex Energy. I previously was a civilian contractor to the United States military in the energy sector. Spent about 9 years in that role, moved to Australia, founded this excellent corporation, and we are very much a STEM company in every possible aspect, developing new renewable energy technologies where they have a blue ocean space and integrating them into multi-tenant buildings, multi-tenant sites. What we're trying to do here is essentially develop 24-hour renewable energy power plants for people in multi-tenant buildings. And we take our investors and our suppliers on that journey with us, and it's a very exciting process. So that's a little bit about who I am, what I'm up to.
Thank you very much. So it's interesting to note that there's the many different ways in which someone might start out at an early stage deep tech company. It could come out of a research institute. It could come from being an established player in industry, then branching out, seeing a gap, a bit of blue ocean. And so when we think about people who are in an early stage, they're a technical founder, they're contemplating this very long, slow burn, as Natalie said. What are some of the things that technical founders can do to balance that need for time to progress the R&D with the importance of actually getting to a point where you've got something to sell and someone who wants to buy it? Who'd like to take that on to start us off?
I'm happy to do it
Go,
every day.
Scott.
Yeah. So look, for me, it is absolutely critical to take your suppliers and your investors on that journey with you. When we meet with a supplier for the first time, we come up with a great idea and we say, okay, what suppliers, 20, 30, 50 different suppliers for different components. So we talk to them about what the product is. We sell the dream and they get very excited about it, just as excited as we do. So the suppliers become part of our team. And we talk to our suppliers about, hey, today I'm going to order one, but in 9 months or 12 months, I'm going to need to order 50 and then 100 and then 1,000. And are you able to supply those? And if you are, what's your timelines look like? And what's the cost look like? And what kind of cost break? So we work on negotiations at the very beginning, at the very start. So we work on commercialization through the process of research and development. And our suppliers are happy to go on that journey with us. And the other thing that companies like ours have to do is you must allow time in your budgets. And you've got to, again, that's part of taking the investors on that journey. Investors, I'm going to get a product and we're going to build it and it's going to work. That's wonderful. But then we've got to work with the regulators to make sure that now that it's done and they can look at it and it's tangible, we've got to get it through that regulatory process as well. So there's a few factors involved, but taking everyone on the journey is very important.
Yeah, that collaboration piece is incredibly important. Natalie, maybe you can comment a bit more on collaborations. I know that's something that you work on with some of your early stage companies.
Yeah, sure. So whenever you're starting up and you're the technical founder, understanding that you need to work with lots of other groups along the way and finding out which groups to work with are extremely important. Understanding that the technology that you have may be absolutely awesome, but if you don't actually have the commercial aspect happening at the same time, as Scott's mentioned, which is important, you're really missing, you're going to miss the boat. As is, finding out network-wise in terms of who's going to help you with your R&D tax, that you have a good commercialisation lawyer in place, that if you're doing additional R&D, where are you going to do that R&D? If you're building a prototype, who are you going to get to help you with the prototype? So in the initial stages, it's not just I'm the one-man band, I've developed the technology, and therefore, because it is so awesome, it's just going to rocket off and sell itself. Number of times I've been told that and then said, well, why is it that you've actually come to chat to us? The commercialisation aspect is really important, and thinking about it and not just going, hey, we'll chuck in a marketing intern and they can look after the commercial aspect isn't really going to help get your product to market. So, finding out early who to connect in with and take as much advice on board as possible and look for experts to be helping you, not thinking, well, the expertise is the technical and everything else is really, anybody can do it, is a really important lesson.
Thanks, Natalie. Mike, I
Yeah.
can see you're about to jump in, so please do.
I have to agree with Natalie about the commercialise, or should I say, the commercial aspects. You can't just put the intern on it, that's for sure. It seems like, you need, in my mind, the engineering effort or the scientific effort is the first half, and many people can do that, but not many people can do the second half to get the thing to market. We meet a lot of very early stage researchers that have some really interesting technology, but they can't talk about it in ways that allow them to convince investors or management of potential customers to get on board. So they'll be talking super deep on the tech, but they're not really thinking much about the business. And it takes some time to get them to the point where they're able to actually have a fluid conversation with an investor, for example, around why you want to invest in this. It is a great technology, but why is it worth investing in? And one comes to mind. I've just spent 3 months working one really early super engineer, super technical geek, but the business side was just not quite there yet. And so it took 3 months to get that presentation to the point where when it finally came to a set of investors, it's like, oh, right, we get that now. But 3 months ago, it was just, a complete technobabble, but not really hitting home on the key business reasons. So that takes quite a lot to get them. And we've done this with, literally hundreds of researchers through the CSIRO ON program, where you've really got to start with, you've got fantastic tech, but we've got to help you take it. And you're going to have different audiences and different messages you have to give those audiences. So the message for the investor is going to be very different to the message for your potential staff, which is going to be very different to the message to the technical staff at the customer or prospective customer, or the management at the prospective customer. They're all different messages that have to be delivered well. But yeah, to your point, Natalie, the sales bit is the last half, and that's the hard bit. Well, not the hard bit, it's just the bit they don't think about.
Yeah, well, from an investor point of view, you're putting money in the hope that you'll get it back at some point, and for you to get it back, someone needs to be buying the stuff at the other end of the journey. So very much about beginning with the end in mind. We might keep talking about communication because we've sort of got onto a communication theme, and so let's talk a bit more about communicating, particularly with investors, and honing that message. So maybe Scott, if you've got some comments in terms of conversations you've had or you've been party to in terms of that investor conversation.
Absolutely. So when it comes to communicating, we have extremely complex products, right? It's a combination of software and hardware, and even some of the greatest engineers from an electrical perspective and a renewable energy perspective, it's mind-boggling to them. So it becomes a bit difficult to communicate the technical aspect. And I find that investors, they want to know what the end result of the technology is, not all the bibs and bobs and all the wires and the cables and all the rest that comes along with whatever it is you're building. So for us, what I've done with our marketing team is I've said, hey, let's whittle this down to 3 bullet points that are results-focused bullet points, right? So, what does the technology achieve? How does the customer benefit? And how does it make money? Because ultimately, you've got to have a plan to sell the product into the market. You have to have a total addressable market. If you haven't properly identified that and your investors don't understand what that is, they really don't know what they're investing in. But investors are investing in something that's going to generate a return, and they want to know that it's going to work. But really, that is up to the founder, and that is up to the people that surround the founder to sell the investor on trust. And at the end of the day, if the investor does not trust that you are going to be able to deliver the product, they certainly aren't going to be able to trust that you're going to be able to sell the product. Early on, we established the investor's knowledge as it relates specifically to what the product is going to achieve. And then after the investor's engaged, we then take them on the journey of what the technology looks like and how it works. But initially, focusing on the technology is not going to achieve good results in any possible capacity.
Definitely. So a great theme of simplification there. And Natalie, I know that from your bio that you have both qualifications in science and in marketing. So it seems like it's a perfect mix. Maybe you can elaborate on some of the tips for, simplifying the complex and speaking intelligently with investors.
Sure. So as a chemist, I've got my own technical language. And whenever I'm talking to chemists, we can shorthand everything, periodic table, that sort of thing. And then when you're talking to non-chemists, then you've got to change the way that you're explaining things. And so what I find is, if you imagine that you're talking with a 12-year-old, if we're talking about your technology, and you've got to explain to them how this works or what it does or why it does it, then you really start breaking down the language. Now, if it's a bit difficult to go to I'm talking to a 12-year-old, don't happen to have one around handy, or, that sort of thing. One good thing to do, particularly when it's a written communication, is actually copy and paste the text into something called a gunning fog index. So if they type that up on the web, gunning, Gunning, then fog, F-O-G, index, it's a readability test. And basically, it'll come back out with a number. And the number will actually tell you how many years of formal education you need to be able to, that you've had, to be able to understand on the first reading of what you've got, right? And so ideally, you don't want it to be higher than 12, which is year 12 education. If you're going for more of a general audience, then you don't want it to be above 8, which is what you find, I guess, the common newspapers are like in terms of understanding. So that's a really simple thing for all, technical, engineering, science people. Grab your text, chuck it into there and see what it comes back with, just for a reality check for you. And then you need to start removing all of the really big jargony words and shorten the sentences, right? So that's really helpful. Because, we've got things like, we've invented a novel polypropylene film that'll blah, 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 blah. And it's a case of, no, it's actually a shrink wrap that goes on your roof, stays on in the wind, and keeps out the leaks. Pretty darn simple compared to, the original technical focus of what it is and how it works and all the rest of it. So, yeah, they're really just simple type of communication things. But if someone implements them immediately, they'll really start to get an idea of how far they're aiming and where they should be aiming.
I like that, because when you're in your own universe, that what you're used to makes sense to you, but as soon as you step outside, so I like that gunning fog, a scientific approach to simplification. So, Mike, let me turn to you. I mean, you are a regular investor, so I guess you've probably seen quite a spectrum of pictures and explanations. What are some of the things that make your job easier, and what are some of the things that maybe drive you nuts?
Look, I think, just to go back to a couple of those points back there, I mean, engineers talk about, and scientists talk about specifications and technology, but customers actually buy benefits. And so it's really hard to get them to actually think in that terms. And sometimes, because we do deal with such a wide variety of scientific engineering fields, not every person in our team has the same amount of expertise across all the different zones. So in some cases, you do have to go back to that. Okay, tell me the base level about why this is great, why we need to worry about not the specification, but the benefit. I think, to add to your point, Natalie, the Hemingway app is one that I use all the time, that I think uses something either similar to your index or the Fleishman index. I think it is. That's quite good as well, and gives you a score, which is great. So, one thing that's one thing is whether they can communicate the benefits to the investor, to the customer, the likelihood that they're going to get that. I think other things that sort of drive me maybe a little bit nuts is quite often you get people in the STEM space that try to convince you that there's science when there's actually not real science there, if that makes sense, or there's pseudoscience, or maybe there is wishful thinking science. So we'd really love to be able to do this. This is what we're aiming to do, but maybe there's not so much science underneath that, or it's more we would like to be able to do it, not we can do it. So trying to work out what's real there and what's not real there is a little bit of a challenge. I think people that are not self-aware about what the risks are. In some of these things, you do have science risk, you do have engineering risk. The three things that will trip you up in life and venture capital every time is physics, chemistry, and biology. those two things will screw you up every single time. And if you think you've got a better solution to some of those, they'll bring you back into the line sooner or later. And so, you know, you have to be, what would you say? I think one thing that I find pleasantly refreshing is when somebody is realistic about assessing the risks of any given science or engineering challenge, and that they're able to have a conversation with you about those risks versus trying to gloss over them or minimize them or mitigate them. And so I find that's refreshingly good. The opposite is it's really frustrating when you don't get that. I think that's probably enough on that side. Just remember, physics, biology, chemistry, they screw you over every time.
Thank you. We might, while we're on the communication theme, pivot to communicating with your customer or the person that you hope will one day be your customer. One of the challenges for a highly technical business is, I think, Natalie, you alluded to it, people say, well, this is such a great product, everyone's going to want it. But that may or may not be the case. So I might get you and then Scott to comment on, you know, how you actually engage with who you hope will be your customer to work out, are they really going to be your customer? And if so, are you providing something that they're going to want?
I guess market research is key to this in the first instance. And also it goes back to the technology and why you developed it in the first place. Because if you've developed a technology because you're really interested in some space and you're heading down this pathway and you haven't actually checked it with anyone in terms of whether it's actually going to meet a market need, then you're basically just chucking a lot of money down a particular avenue, and then, you know, maybe it'll get commercial later. So ideally, you've been speaking to people in industry, you've worked out that there's this problem, you're working on a solution for it, and as you're working on the solution, you're sort of testing it with people, obviously when it's in a sort of a protectable state to begin with, but that you're actually getting feedback into it about how big a problem it is, you know, what sort of things they've tried in the past. Really, the more knowledge that you can glean all the way through the development of your product will make it easier to sell at the end of the day, because you found the pressure points, you found what they'll pay for, you found out what else is out there in the market and how different yours is. And so all of those lead you down to actually, when you create the marketing material, as Mike was not suggesting, but saying, it's about the benefits to that client at the end of the day. And you're picking up in your market research and you're constant talking with them about what it is that they want and how it's going to help them. And so therefore, the best marketing is actually putting what the customer needs into their words and putting it back at them, so that when they hear them, they think, yeah, that's exactly my problem. That's exactly what I'm going through. Absolutely, I really want that because that's going to help me. And that's where the marketing comes from, and the good communication. So, yeah, I take them down that journey, and that's how it gets out there and it works.
Lovely. Scott, I mean, you've got a leading piece of technology that you're working on. How do you have those conversations with the potential customers to convince or to work out that there's a fit?
Well, this is a really great conversation, first of all, because this is the foundation of any company, any product that's being developed, and really great contributions there, folks. For our company, what we do is we come up with a great idea. Now we'll all sit around or all be, you know, laying in bed at night, or I don't know, on the golf course, and I'll say, oh my God, I've got another idea, right? And I'm super excited about it. I come back to the office, I tell everybody about it, I get everybody enthusiastic, and then we go, yeah, but are people going to buy it? We don't know, right? So we've got 3 major products in development in the renewable energy space, and you know, extremely exciting, and we're excited about it, but we don't know if, you know, the end consumer is going to purchase them. So what I do is I stop and I say, okay, you know, we're all very excited about this. Let's go talk to people. Let's go talk to customers. Let's go talk to them before we talk to investors about the research and development that we'd like to start taking on. Let's have a conversation with the actual customers who would purchase this product, this concept of a product. So what we'll do is we develop a kind of a 1 or 2 page document, and we'll send our salespeople out, and I'll go out and I'll meet with people in the industry. And we actually have these conversations. If we can achieve this for you with this product, what would you do differently? What price point? Where do you see value here? If we can make this much money a day for your company with this product, how do you see this fitting in? And so we have these conversations. We identify if it's marketable right up front, and then we begin the process of speaking to those suppliers, figuring out if we can meet those price points. Because everything in this world that costs money or is going to make money has to have some form of return on investment. You have to figure out the threshold that is acceptable in the marketplace. And if you're too far out, then it's not going to be a viable product, no matter how great it is. If people have great products, and you all know this, there's some great minds out there. They come up with a great idea, but then it just doesn't fit into the marketplace because it does not get a return on investment that's acceptable or tolerable. Yeah.
All right. Well, as we continue to think about that communication piece, it can be challenging if you're a highly technical person to be able to communicate confidently and clearly. So I'm curious for those in our audience, how can you hone your communication skills? Because not all of us feel that we're born as communicators. Mike, have you got some thoughts on, where people, if they don't feel they're good at it, how can they get better?
Yeah, look, I think somebody mentioned jargon before. De-jargonizing things is probably a good start there. But look, what you're trying to do is tell a story, and you're trying to take everybody on a journey with you. So, where's the end point of the story? What's the magnificent future there? What are the paths along the way? What's your first step? Why are you the right person to take that journey? So that's sort of important. I want to make some comments about some of those questions, some of those points before. When we think about the sort of different markets, there's a couple of markets where it's obvious there is a need. If you can cure stage 4 metastatic cancer right now, there's guaranteed a need for that. But there might be a couple of channel risks around how you get that product into the market. But it's fairly obvious that there's an unsatisfied need there because people are dying every day from stage 4 metastatic cancer. So we know that's an obvious winner if you can do it. It's very technically difficult to do, and you might have some challenges in getting that product to market and what that process looks like, but that's an obvious one. Then you've got other markets which are emerging markets. So we have a reason to believe that the market will be there around about the time that we're developing this technology and get this technology to market. These are the reasons why we believe this. And here are the warning signs of the changes, the things that are happening. And so those things are less certain from a market perspective. You might have the timing right or wrong. There might be, as I said before, some physics, chemistry, or biology problems that get in your way. But you feel there's going to be a market there. So I think that there's a couple of different things there. I mean, I would prefer to take the science risk without the market risk most times, but then there's always, quite often really big returns come from getting into or even making markets early. So, I don't know whether that helps you or not. Probably a bit deviated off your question, but I think the ideal founder in that scenario has been through and experienced pain that their problem is solving. And so they've either worked in an environment where they had to solve this problem or had to try to solve this problem. And their research sort of is very much influenced by that situation.
So there's a genuine fire in the belly because it's a problem that means something to them.
Yeah, they've been through it. They understand the issue. They've had to solve for the problem before in one way or another. They have pretty good insight into the customer. I mean, it doesn't mean they shouldn't speak to customers. They should, but it's not like they've said, right, I'm 21, I've just come out of university, I'm going to go and solve a problem for a farmer. It's like, have you been near a farm recently? No, not really. Whereas somebody that may have actually been a farmer, I'll give you an example. Guy up in Queensland, Andrew Bates, running a company called Swarm Farm, building autonomous robotic tractors that drive themselves. He is a farmer. He owns thousands of acres of land. He had this problem. He got together with a bunch of university robotics researchers to build a solution to his problem. That's sort of interesting.
So this is, I think, leading us to a bit of a conversation. I think the phrase total addressable market's been mentioned at least once, and it's just sort of, I guess, looking at the big picture. We're talking to individual customers, but then there's the big picture of how many people are likely to need or want or be in a position to afford this product. So let's talk a bit about total addressable market, because that can be a bit of a stumbling block from a founder point of view and an investor point of view. Maybe, Natalie, are you happy to sort of kick us off in that direction? How does someone think about and estimate the total addressable market realistically?
Sure. I guess I'll start with, on the marketing side, it's quite often an inventor, a researcher will come to me and say, our technology will help everybody. It can be used for everything, right? Because we're trying to define what the marketing strategy is going to be and who the customers are and all the rest of it. And when I hear it'll do it for everybody, as in like a platform technology and it can go across every sector and all the rest of it, I like to try and break things down a bit further and say you've only got a certain amount of money. And for that certain amount of money, you're going to be able to try and reach who's going to buy your product, right? And not run out of money as you're trying to do that. So if you think about Australia has 25 million people, right? And 500 of those people are the decision makers that are going to be able to, be interested and buy. Then, and those 500 people, they could be in very large corporations or buying on behalf of hospitals or whatever. It's not, 500 cute little individuals all working out of their lockdown houses or something, right? Or maybe they are. But if you're trying to target 500 people out of a 25 million possibility in Australia, then how do you do that with a budget of, 50,000 or 100,000, right? So that's when they need to be able to look at exactly what this market looks like, who that buyer looks like, why they're buying, where they go to get their information, what type of industry. You need to start nutting down a lot more targeted to be able to define who or what this buyer is and why they're buying and how to get to them with the very, very limited funds that you have. So I know you've asked about addressable market, haven't gotten into that yet, but I find this is the first bit that they have to get over, because otherwise they run out of money before they've done anything, because they're so busy putting out messages here, there and everywhere and all the rest of it. So a targeted approach. I also find that when companies are pitching, that they'll use an IBIS report or one of those other large reports where they say the market is like this, yes, right, for this industry, right? And this number that they're quoting has absolutely nothing to do with this tiny little section of what's actually doable, where you get into the addressable market as opposed to the, fantastic, this number looks awesome because it's in the billions, and therefore I will get 0.5% of the billions, and so therefore my revenue will be this. So that's all I'm going to get into on addressable markets, because I'm sure Mike and Scott have lots better info and angles on it. But there's some of the things that I see where I just kind of,
Yeah, so getting focused on who is your customer rather than we can help everyone.
Yes.
And Mike, I might turn to you and then to Scott and to sort of keep building out on this, how you work out and define your market.
Yeah, look, I think, the example I use, which sort of puts some numbers on that discussion, if we look at semiconductors, for example, semiconductors are roughly $450 billion US per annum globally. So if somebody comes to you and says it's a $450 billion a year business, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, that's the gazillion different types of semiconductor. What are you making? Well, I'm making a wireless chip. So, okay, well, about 60 billion of that is RF related wireless products, but around 20 billion of that are Wi-Fi related products. And then you're making a particular version of Wi-Fi, which is probably going to be about 3 or 4 billion. So it's actually not a $450 billion a year market. It's probably a $2 billion market, but I don't really worry that much about the precision of that number. What I'm trying to understand is whether it's a believably large number, and whether there is, whether we are talking about the same thing, whether it is, the product that's being built, is that going to be able to go into a believably large market and be successful? Whether it's 2 billion or 20 billion, okay, 10 difference, that might be a bit, times 10 might be a bit big, but as long as it's in the multiple billions and it's not hotly contested, I'm okay with that. So lots of people quote you these massive market numbers, but I don't believe many of them, and you can go and find 20 different versions of them by Googling pretty quickly.
Scott, how about you when you're thinking about market, whether it's for your own products or working with other companies? How do you sort of define that and hone that to be clear about where the market is?
We research. I mean, we spend a lot of time and we expend a lot of effort in research. Mm-hmm. And when we're researching, we're making darn sure that it's a reliable source. And so we then take that data and we beat it down into what we believe is a true total addressable market. And that it is defining your TAM is all about research. Every bit of it. You have got to take the time. You've got to put forth the effort. And this is a team effort for us. So it's not just one person in the office that does the research. Everybody kind of digs in and gets involved. It's an education process for our team and our company as well. But it's just research and accurate research. We build a spreadsheet that we all work off of, and we provide our contributions to it, and we define what that TAM for whatever specific product is that we're developing. Do you mind, Liz, if I take you back to a question that you asked earlier, and this was about honing your communication skills?
Sure, please do.
I'd like to just touch on that real quick because this is very personal to me. I was a horrible communicator. I mean, atrocious. And I would get so nervous before I went into any meeting of any kind. And so what I did is I said, I've just got to start communicating, right? I might not be a good communicator, but I need to start communicating. So I started reading and I started communicating. I started putting myself in front of people. I'd asked to do a presentation just to do it. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to critique my skills and my communication skills. Could you do that for me? Yes. And I would face my fears, and I would get so stressed out. This was about 10, 15 years ago. I would get so stressed out during a meeting. I'd get in my car and I'd drive my car down the road and I would fall asleep because I was so nervous just to go into that meeting and communicate a little bit. But now I've come a long way since then, and I'm quite an effective communicator. So I'd just like to encourage, just simplify your message and just start communicating. Read books about communication. How to Win Friends and Influence People is an excellent book by Dale Carnegie. If you haven't read it, gosh, you've really got to read it. If you're in business in general. And so I just wanted to touch on that, Liz. I'm sorry for interrupting the flow of your.
No, we are controllers of our own destiny, Scott. So we can move our campfire wherever we choose. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
One of the things that we've been asked to comment on is areas in the deep tech universe that seem maybe on the verge of experiencing mass market adoption. Ones that are maybe got a ways to go, so be prepared for a long ride. We're not trying to give investment advice here, I hasten to add, but just to help, what are we seeing that's interesting in the deep tech landscape? Or it may be something that's perhaps got a smaller market, but it's quite a powerful, could make a powerful change and therefore be worth considering. Mike, do you feel game to kick us off on that one?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think that there's always a range of different interesting areas, but I think things that seem to be on the boil a lot at the moment, lots of interest, but also lots of scientific progress, should I say. Synthetic biology is looking to be a big one around making all sorts of new materials without sort of consuming non-renewable resources. So that's synthetically changing a yeast or a bacteria to allow it to produce a particular compound protein, whatever it might be, that is used instead of something else. So, for example, it could be making cultured meat. It could be making replacement leather. It could be making a pharmaceutical. It could be making a different type of material or chemical that has been made using a non-renewable process in the past. It could be making hydrogen in some cases. There's a group at Macquarie University that have got a bacteria that when you feed it sugar, it makes hydrogen. Now, that's still really early. It's probably not quite commercial, but it's not commercial yet, but it could be at one point. So synthetic biology is pretty interesting. I think decarbonisation around energy, around recyclables, around renewables, storage is super important. How do we store renewable energy? I mean, there's other areas that are a bit maybe fuzzier about when they come into fruition. Quantum computing, for example, is very interesting. I think that's one of those markets where it doesn't 100% exist yet, but we know that the world today has an insatiable appetite for computing power. We know that we are maxing computing power out everywhere, and we want more of it with less energy to produce it. So if quantum computing can develop there's probably an interesting pathway there. Yeah. I'll let the others jump in on there.
And I want to make an observation at this point, because one of the features of investing in this sector is it's not simply about getting a return, which obviously an investor needs, but also often the sense of, well, I'm investing to make a difference, to bring into life a product that the world needs, whether it's making a difference in energy or renewable resources or health. And so that alignment of the passion for the particular problem that you're solving, I think, is quite an important thing for an investor to think about, particularly if you're going to be on a long journey. So I might pass to Natalie and then to Scott in terms of some areas that you think are, interesting, hot at the moment, or potentially emerging.
We tend to get involved with technologies that we believe are going to help people and the planet effectively. So that's a big driver for us. Our company is not all about the money, and frequently we'll do pro bono type work in areas that we want to help move because they don't have the resources themselves yet to move, but it's of personal interest to myself and my team. So, particularly in carbon removal, if you like, from the atmosphere. So we're involved in something in that sense at the moment, which will pull carbon dioxide out of industries, turn it into other materials that are of use. So I can see a lot of that now that we've got, I guess, we are getting a lot more focus on that globally, more so outside of Australia, unfortunately, rather than in it. But it would be nice to see, I guess, some of the focus. Like, there's lots of industry in Australia, I think, that are in renewables. We want to do something about climate change. We want to do carbon emissions. And so I can see that all building. And I'm really excited about that space and us being in it. Same with food, as Mike was suggesting, in terms of different ways of not eating animals necessarily, and alternatives for healthy living, but also the fact that the planet's changing, our environment's changing, and resources are limited. So looking at other ways that we can address that. Also personalised medicine, instead of, a bulk shove of this into everybody is going to work. It's not working so much. So personalised medicine is becoming a much bigger thing. And also batteries, in terms of when we're talking about renewables or electric vehicles or drones, none of them work so well unless they've got a battery as a backup. And so life of batteries and how to extend that, and then also recycle the materials in batteries. So that circular economy people are thinking more about as well. And I'll pass to Scott.
Scott, what are you seeing?
I concur with your assessments, both of you, and you're spot on. The clean tech, renewable sector is going absolutely insane. Now, EV tech as well is also going to be massive. So everyone knows. I think all of the countries of the world are going to start moving into the EV sector. I think the United States, Australia, England's already, I think, said that all of their vehicles need to be EV by the year 2030. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's correct. But the for us, another thing that's really big is communications, because means of communication, low orbit satellites and whatnot. What Rex Energy is in the process of doing, or I think tomorrow will likely have approval on building one of the first large-scale renewable energy generation plants for the country of Papua New Guinea in the middle of nowhere. And in order to do that, we have to have good communications because everything is cloud connected with us, right? And so this third world investment, by the way, is going to continue to grow, and the world is kind of figuring out that you can't burn diesel generators and thousands of diesel generators constantly in Papua New Guinea, and then or in Samoa or wherever it may be. But then in our Western civilization countries, everybody's got to have solar panels, right? So I think that what's happening is you're seeing Western countries begin the process of investing into the likes of Papua New Guinea, the Samoan Islands, and Indonesia even, in order to help them catch up to the rest of the world, because these are the big polluters. It's the same thing with the ocean, right? You can clean up the ocean, but unless you solve the problem, and so you're going to see investment into these areas. And I think that's kind of what everyone's been saying. Definitely energy storage, as long as it's thought through and it's an effective product that's mobile, lightweight, and has longevity. Lithium doesn't have longevity. I'm not a fan of lithium. We do not use lithium in any of our products and any energy storage. But the way the world is moving right now, especially in this energy sector, you see it, you hear it in the news, you see it in the news. It's a daily discussion, is that our legacy energy transmission and distribution and production systems can no longer cope with what's happening. We're adding the EV load. Everybody, I have an iPad, I have a little tablet that's like a paper tablet that I use for notes, and I have a laptop, right? And we're charging and I have a phone. So we're charging all these devices. We're now going to be charging our cars. We're shutting down coal-fired power plants, which I understand. In order to do that, you're going to see small generators at multi-tenant sites, large regions of the city. You're going to see small generators commingling with the legacy generation systems that have been around for 100 or so years. And I think that area of the world and that area of business is being invested in heavily. And it's being invested in heavily from America, from the United Kingdom, from India. We have 9 families that exist in the Middle East who are looking at investing into our company, and they came out of nowhere because they recognize that oil is dying and they've got to diversify, how they make their money, right? And the future is clean tech. That's a very long-winded answer. I'm so sorry.
Can I jump in there for a sec? So
Please do, Mark.
what do you see there from an energy perspective? You mentioned you don't use lithium. What's your solution? What is the tech?
That is such a good question. So right now, what we've tried vanadium flow, and it's an interesting product. The reason I really liked vanadium flow is one of our objectives is we want to invest in Australia. We want to buy Australian products. We want to integrate that into our product. We want to make sure that the bulk of everything that we're building here in Australia comes from Australia. This country is an amazing place, right? So one of the largest vanadium deposits in the entire world, I think the largest, is in North Queensland, right? So that's why I looked at vanadium flow initially. It's not a bad product. It has its good applications. It actually is also quite sturdy under fairly high temperature, which is great for Queensland. We're in the Gold Coast here. It's pretty hot here. But aside of that, I see ultracapacitors and supercapacitors being incredible methods to store energy. They have the cycles that the world needs, and they also have obviously the longevity, right? And they're quite frankly benign. Lithium, as you know, lithium can catch fire, and once it catches fire, God love you, you're not going to put it out. So I'm not a huge fan of lithium, especially when I'm integrating it into buildings where people live. You've got 50 tenants in a building, or you've got big places of business where there's a shopping center. I don't want to integrate lithium energy storage there because I feel, if something were to happen, I've got to live with that, right? And I want to make sure that my product is as safe as possible. So I think you're going to see energy storage move on the marketplace that's cost effective, which your capacitors are, but are also, they don't have that source of potential danger that lithium does. Yeah.
So, but I mean, I'll say to you that lithium.
Mark and Scott, I'm going to exercise moderator's
Okay.
privileges here. I mean, we could have a really interesting discussion about just this question, and I've let it go on because you guys are both passionate, and also it's a great illustration that all of these new technologies are solving quite complex problems, and you may solve one problem and create another one. So you need that research, that planning, that collaboration with multiple sources of expertise. So, Mike, if there's anything you're dying to say, you may say it, but then we're going to, and I'm going to give Natalie a chance to weigh in on the energy storage point
Natalie,
as well.
You go for it, Natalie.
Look, all I can say is when you're talking about, you're worried about things catching fire.
Yeah.
Hydrogen storage.
Oh, that's extremely tight. Agreed. Concur with your assessment. Yeah.
What about gas? We've had gas in our buildings for 150 years.
This is true.
It actually does catch fire. We've had petrol in our cars forever. It catches fire too. The lithium fire thing is pretty, let's just say there's gazillions of them, billions of them around the world. They're not catching fire very often. It's pretty unusual. So it's a point. In fact, the bigger thing against lithium is the fact that it's actually pretty hard to extract. There's not enough of it for future demands, and I suspect we'll see a lithium and other battery metals spike at some time in the near future. And they're actually pretty dirty in some ways because the recycling of those in 10 to 20 years' time is going to be a bit of a problem, but it's still better than coal, and it's still better than gas, and still solve that problem. I think the problem with batteries we've got at the moment is, one, we've got a material shortage that's already happening and coming. But secondly, they're very peaky sort of things. They do well for 2-3 hours at a time, but they don't do the sunset to sunrise problem well. The only way to scale them is to go and add another one or another one or another one. Something like hydrogen gives you an ability to scale out that by adding more storage, which doesn't massively increase the overall balance of plant. And so that's one aspect, but that's still got some technical development to go as well. We're still, in my mind, we've still got a couple of challenges to solve before we can switch the coal plants off. And that sunset to sunrise, we have to solve it. And the thing that's getting in the way is materials and chemistry. Physics and chemistry, they kill you every time. And that's what's happening with batteries.
Yeah.
So this has been a lovely mini case study for our audience. Whether you're a founder thinking through your strategy, there's always extra angles to be thinking about it. You're not just solving one problem, you may be solving multiple problems. And for investors, these are maybe the questions that you're going to be asking the founders. Well, what are the implications of this? Is this renewable? Is this creating a different problem? Is this medical product going to create side effects? So this has been a great illustration, team. So I'm very grateful to you. We're going to wrap this up fairly soon. I just want to open it up again in terms of things that an investor's looking for that maybe founders overlook. We've talked a little bit about market. We've talked a little bit about focus. Maybe there's a question around team. We haven't talked much about team experience, a bit more about competitive advantage. So I'll start with Natalie and then go to Scott and then Mike. So some things that perhaps people overlook that are important to investors.
Well, you're right in terms of team. So the team is really, really important. It's not just about the technology, it's not just about the market, but it's also about the team. And in some cases, the technical founder is great at being the CEO. And in many cases, they're also better having a co-founder or a commercial CEO that's in charge instead. So I think there needs to be a recognition early on in the piece of who's good at what, and complementary skill sets to build up a really, really good, strong team and it doesn't necessarily just have to be the technical founder. Being the CEO is the only model.
Very good point. Mike, what about you? What is it? You might want to build on that team theme or another element.
Look, team's important, no question. And I think it's important to say, though, where you start when you start with as an early stage investor in a deep tech company, you can't expect it all to be done yet. That's your job, is to help get through that process with them and to help them. If one thing that's not useful is if they're not flexible, open to feedback, or willing to adopt new ideas. If they're willing to think about areas that they don't know about, like business development and marketing, that's fantastic. One of the things I say is that if you want us to invest in you, I know you don't know much about sales and marketing. What I need you to do is commit to be world class at it at some point in the future and build towards that. I know you don't have it today. That's okay. we'll build that process out for you. But you've got to recognise what stage you're at.
Yeah.
And Scott, what would you add to that mix?
Oh, so when we have a new investor come on board or if we're courting an investor, one of the first things that I do is I will meet them initially and have a discussion one-on-one, very important. But then I also invite them to attend our corporate office. I do, and both of you are exactly correct. I introduce them to my team. I explain the roles that each of these individuals play into the development of our products, and what marketing, whatever it may be, and that's really important. But one thing that's at the end of the day, the question is does your investor trust you? That's it. That is where the rubber meets the pavement. So your objective as a founder is to explain to the investors who you are, what your background is, exactly, introduce them to the team, but it's, do the investors trust you? If they trust you, then they're going to move forward with the investment. And if they don't trust you, if they find any doubt that you're going to be successful, all deals are off. So it's all about explaining to them your journey, your plan, and business is chess. Plan your next moves and plan them far ahead, and show the investors that you've planned, because you just like in the military, you act very quickly, but you act very quickly. That is on the foundation of methodical planning. And if you can show that you have a methodical plan in place to win, and you've designed your products to fit into the market, and you know the market, you understand your competition, boy, you're going to win a lot. Your hit ratio with investors is going to be a lot higher. But you also got to be working with the right investors as well. Some investors just don't have the understanding of the industry that you're in, and therefore they're going to have a lower offer than someone who understands the industry that you're in. They're like, yes, I get it. Oh, I'm really excited about this. So yeah, I suppose that would be my answer to your question.
What I might do now is go around one more time in terms of, let's put our minds to the investor perspective, in terms of, for the investors who are watching this and starting and thinking about investments in this sector, some of the qualities, or like, how can you actually be supporting the founder in the long term, whether it's not just money, it might be your connections, it might be your coaching, it might be just being willing to cope with bad news. So let's think about some tips for our investors in terms of what you need to be ready for, so that you can be most effective and less surprised. So I'm going to go Natalie, Mike and Scott again, and then we'll probably wrap it up.
So we're talking about a deep tech founder in the first instance?
Well, an investor contemplating investing in a deep tech business. What do they need to be thinking on? Yeah.
I guess that they either have some particular interest in the technology or the market. It's better, I think, that they definitely have some sort of affinity in there, and it's not just money going into something that they don't understand at all. So Scott's observation that you need to trust them is implicit. But then also understand and be able to fill those gaps where they don't have the knowledge or the expertise. So if they've been primarily in a research organisation and they're a founder of some deep tech, then there's a lot on the commercial side that they may not know. It just depends on what experiences they've had before and whether they've gone out and done this thing before or it's their first time. So understanding from that perspective. Understanding the role that they may want to take, because in some cases they want to perhaps still have a hand in the R&D side of things and ongoing development of the next stage. So understanding from them who the team is going to be and what gaps there are going to be in the team and what role that they're best in is I think a good thing for the investor to investigate.
Thank you. And Mike, from your point of view, some advice to our investor audience?
Look, I think you have to assess your own capabilities in a particular space as well. I mean, I guess giving scientific advice to somebody developing a cancer therapy when you've come from being a dentist or some other success in life in a different space, probably not that useful. So do you really, well, first of all, are you going to be able to build enough of these investments to actually get a portfolio win out of this that makes a difference, that gives you an overall return out of your portfolio? That's one question. Are you doing this because you really like the concept and it's really, a fantastic thing you want to get behind, or are you making a business out of investing in these companies? So you need a portfolio strategy, maybe, or you just need to acknowledge that you're 100% behind this idea and you love it and you're doing it because it's as much a passion project as it is a proper investment. And then how much value can you actually bring to those people, or are you better off helping them get off the line and stepping back out of the way and maybe helping bring some people in to help them? But too often you get investors that put their hands in and sort of try to, rearrange stuff that doesn't work out so well, isn't their segment. Lots of stuff they don't understand doesn't work so well.
Thank you. And Scott, some thoughts for our investors?
No, I've invested in a few companies myself, and so what I like to invest when I have the ability to support the company in a positive outcome, right? So if I can link them to some contacts that are going to help them to be more successful, provide them opportunity to market, that just makes sense, right? So I can invest and then grow my investment. I invest and grow my investment. And if you're an investor that has that ability and you have that, the connections to make a certain type of, or a certain area or a certain, type of company successful, you're really leaps and bounds ahead of the competition, so because as a founder, that's what I look for as well. So we can get money at any moment, right? So, but it's all about getting money, but taking an investment from somebody who can actually help us to get to market quicker or whatever it may be, right? So there's different components there, but establish and agree as well on involvement levels up front. So have that communication with the founders. Say, look, this is the level of involvement that I'd like to have in your company. Would you welcome that? And boy, that sure does help to build trust as well, because that trust goes both ways. An investor has to trust the founder, but the founder also has to trust the investors as well. So, and trust is a two-way street when it comes to business. Yeah.
Well, we could probably talk for a lot longer on these topics, and I can see that our time is up. So I hope for our audience that you've got a lot of useful insights into both the landscape of deep tech, and whether you're a founder or an investor, learnt from these excellent speakers some of their hard lessons so that you can not make the same mistakes. And thank you to our panel. So thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Wholesale Investor, for making this possible. And thank you, audience.
Thank you as well, Liz. Wonderful job.
See you.
Thank you.
See you, team. Thank you.
Thank you.